Joe Scarborough mocked people on Twitter in particular who want more from Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, want better from the conservative Democrats in the Senate, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. Now, this specific conversation is around the filibuster. But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond just the filibuster. It gets to the core of, like, the existence of these conservative Democrats and the role that they play. And you're going to see here, Joe Scarborough is a vociferous defender now of these conservative Democrats, and he's mocking people who are kind of prodding them and pushing them to do better.
Yeah, no, Casey, it's funny. I mean, I'm sure it's not funny to Kyrsten Sinema, but, you know, I'm looking on Twitter and I'm hearing some of these comments from people attacking Kyrsten Sinema. Well, she can just leave the party. And I'm sitting there thinking, what are you, a Republican in Georgia? Like, you have two Democratic senators in John McCain and Barry Goldwater's state. And you want them to leave? What? Do you think you're going to get Che Guevara elected out there? It's like, seriously. When are people going to grow up? And Joe Manchin, he's voting like he's a Democrat.
Last Democrat from West Virginia.
He made Democrats the majority party. He is in a state that Donald Trump won 68% to 29%. And these idiots on Twitter.
Okay, so now when it comes to the conversation about the filibuster, I actually have mixed feelings on it. I don't agree with people who are just like, just fucking get rid of it, bro, because that's going to be good for the left, period. And it's like, no, because what happens when we're in the minority, as we inevitably will be in the future, maybe even the near future? What then? Then you're going to be like, fuck, I wish we still had that filibuster. So I don't even necessarily agree with, like, the fervor now that's like, get rid of the filibuster. And the other thing is, I don't know why people are trying to run before we can crawl, because all you need to do to get what you want is tell the Democrats, stop fucking around and do shit through reconciliation right now. You can pass something with 51 votes through the process of reconciliation. That's what the Republicans use for their tax cuts for the rich bill. So I don't know why people are like acting like reconciliation isn't even an option and it isn't even on the table, when that's like the number one thing you should be yelling at Democrats to do, because you could get something passed with 51 votes right now. And it doesn't require abolishing the filibuster in order to do it. So anyway, I'm a little torn on that conversation. I get where people are coming from when they say, even as a matter of principle, like, a simple majority should get shit passed. Yeah, I see that argument for sure. But it's just weird to me that it's like, why are you, again, you're aiming at the harder thing as opposed to just doing the easier thing with the same result, which is reconciliation. I see this a lot. It's like with impeachment. Hey, let's try to do impeachment, which requires getting 16 or 17 Republican senators because we don't want Donald Trump to ever be able to run for office again. Okay, but why would you do that through impeachment when you could just do that through the 14th Amendment and get that same result with a simple majority? He won't be able to run, and you only need a simple majority as opposed to needing 16 or 17 Republican senators. Like, why are you making life harder for yourself? Anyway, I digress. So on this specific issue, I'm not even necessarily disagreeing with Joe Scarborough and with the people on the panel there, but the problem is this. His over-defense of the conservative Democrats, the blue dog Democrats, the corporate Democrats. This is a guy who just last week or a few weeks ago had on his show an author who's an expert in FDR and the New Deal and the neoliberal turn for the Democratic Party. And Joe Scarborough was applauding the guy and was agreeing with him with everything he was saying when this guy was like, you know, social democracy is the way forward and the conservative Democrats are the fucking problem and they need to be purged from the party, and we got to go FDR style now. Joe Scarborough was agreeing with everything that guy was saying. Now he turns around a couple weeks later, and he's defending the people who he agreed were the exact problem in the Democratic Party. What are you doing? And that gets to the biggest issue here, which is this. There's this mythology out there. Only somebody like Kyrsten Sinema, who's a Democrat, can win in Arizona. Only somebody like Joe Manchin, who's a Democrat, can win in West Virginia, because those states are so conservative that you have to vote for a conservative Democrat. So the Democrat has to be a lot like the Republicans. Bullshit. I'm calling bullshit on that. Because in the case of Manchin in particular, in West Virginia. It's not like West Virginia workers, coal workers, are like, I really want my senator to deregulate Wall Street and cut taxes for the rich more. That's what I want. They don't think that at all. They don't want a conservative Democrat. They want a populist Democrat. They want a pro-working class Democrat. And Joe Manchin is not populist, and he's not pro-working class. That's why he said no to the $2,000 checks, and then it was only after an aggressive campaign forced him to say, did I say no? I meant maybe, and probably I'm actually in favor of it. See, here's the thing. They don't make the right distinctions. In the case of Joe Manchin, the only ways in which his voting base are conservative are on like social issues. So yeah, you'll have people who are like pro-gun and anti-abortion. Democrats who are pro-gun and anti-abortion. So on the social issues, sure, they're more right-leaning. But on the economic issues, they're left. They're solidly left. They're pro-union. They want overtime pay. They want to raise the minimum wage. They want higher taxes on the wealthy. Like, these are populists. So the idea that you want like a Wall Street Democrat is nonsense. It's a myth. And these idiots in the media run cover for that myth, for the establishment of the Democratic Party. And they feed into this idea that like, oh, in red states, you need Democrats who are basically Republicans. No, you don't. You don't. You need populist Democrats. So that's the problem, man. And it kind of is infuriating. Because, by the way, I don't know what the number is right this second, because last time I looked was like 2 years ago or so. But 538 does this thing where they track the voting record of Democrats, and it says what percentage of the time they vote with Trump. And Joe Manchin would oscillate between 50% of the time and 60% of the time. So he would 50 or 60% of the time, he would be voting with Trump. They might think that that's what voters of West Virginia want. But no, the devil is in the details. And oftentimes he would vote, for example, to like deregulate Wall Street. That's not what West Virginia voters want. So it's bullshit. This idea that like you need those kinds of Democrats in order to get Democratic majorities. No, you don't. And in fact, this really highlights the divide, the real divide in the country. There's a bigger divide between the elites and the people than there's just a partisan divide of left versus right, Republican versus Democrat. That's the reality. And so you have this totally out-of-touch elite establishment in Washington, D.C., which keeps going with business as usual in the status quo. And the people, when you look at the numbers, the people are relatively in agreement with giant majorities on some of the most important issues of the day. Minimum wage, raising taxes on the wealthy, raising taxes on corporations, Medicare for all, universal health care, ending the wars, an infrastructure bill. Like, the people are together. Republican and Democrat, the actual people are together, and it's the people in D.C. who usually are blocking progress. So, of course, Joe Scarborough, not ideologically consistent. Just a few weeks ago, he was agreeing that FDR's path forward in universal health care, that's the way to go. And now he's propping up one of the worst Democrats who's against universal health care. He's propping up the worst Democrat who's like for Wall Street deregulation. And, I'd expect no less from Joe Scarborough.